Hello YouTube, and welcome to this new exercises tier list. This is the fourth installment. If you have missed the previous episodes, we started with biceps and move on to triceps, and after that we did lats. And at the end of the lats video, I promised that the follow-up episode was also going to be about the upper back, about the traps in particular. What I had forgotten, however, is that I already promised you guys that the episode, the fourth one, would be about the chest. I actually ran a poll and you voted. So what I decided to do instead is, instead of depriving you of one episode, I'm going to do both. I'm going to do the chest one today for Christmas, and I'm going to get the traps one out as soon as possible, so you will get two tier lists instead of one. But for today, as I said, we are going to focus on the pecs, and I have a lot of exercises to discuss. Actually, the list has 60 of them. So what exactly is the goal of this? The goal is for me to tell you guys which ones to me are at the top, should be at the top of the Christmas tree, and which ones you should just kick out because they are just going to be detrimental to your chest development. So the tiers I selected for the day are as follows. All the way at the bottom, we have A cup tier. A cup tier because if you do these exercises thinking you're going to get a massive chest, you're going to end up with itty bitty titties instead. You won't even be able to fill an A cup bra, and we want to avoid that as much as possible. Then we have the mediocre tier. These are bad exercises because better alternatives exist out there, and therefore there is no reason to do them. They are not the best suited to develop the chest. Then we have the decent tier. These are okay exercises. I have nothing against them, but you can always do better. Then we have the excellent tier. This is when we get into the range and the type of exercises that I recommend everyone try at least once. And if you want them in your rotation, in your program, that is a great idea because they are perfect, but not quite there yet. They're missing that extra something that would make them gorilla tier. I picked the gorilla because the gorilla is an animal with a massive chest, also a massive ass, but the glutes tier list is for another day. So this is the cream of the crops. This is the best exercises. It's almost impossible to find faults in them. Most anyone is going to get great gains off of them. And therefore, these are, in my opinion, must do. You must have at least some of the ones I'm going to describe today in your training, or else you're just leaving gains on the table and you won't get as big of a chest as you could. So let's get into it right away. But before that, a few details I want to put out there first so that you understand where I'm coming from, where I judge these lifts. To me, when discussing chest, the most important portions of the chest are going to be the lower portion of the chest that makes the bulk of it, and the mid chest, so what makes the thickness and the aesthetic aspect of the chest. The upper chest is still important, but it's a smaller portion. So if a lift is really good for the upper chest, but doesn't really develop the rest of the muscle, it will never be gorilla tier. Okay, keep that in mind, that's very important. And then we also have the impact on the shoulders. How much do the shoulders do? Do they still the work? I will give you as much detail as possible for every single lift to tell you what to do, what not to do, what portion of the chest they work. But because there is 60 items in this list, I cannot spend too much time on each of them, or else the video will be 2 hours. So what I did instead is I made clusters. Lifts will be paired together in groups that share similar types. So presses together, push-ups together. But I also separated them enough so as to make this tier list as entertaining for you guys as possible. And now that this has been said, we can get into the thick of things. And we're going to start with the classic lift, the one that you wanted to hear about, and the one that naturally is going to end in gorilla tier, and that is the bench press. I know that it's now trendy to shit on the bench, to say that it's not optimal, it's bad for you, yada yada. If you want a big chest and bench agrees with you, keep benching and you'll have massive pecs. To me, I never did any of these schmancy fancy methods. I built my chest off of one other lift that I will be detailing later, and the bench press, and it was all I needed. So the bench must be God tier. There is really no way around that. Now, all the variation of the bench press could be even better, or they could be slightly worse. And I think the next one is slightly worse, and I insist on slightly. I will be putting it in excellent tier, and that is the Larsen press. If you take a look at the icon I selected, you can see that it's our boy Free Kid, Larson pressing 500 pounds like the beast he is. The reason why I put it in excellent tier and not gorilla tier is because things like instability, things like having to brace your core more, all of these are things that, yes, will in a sense force you to use less weight, but not necessarily because you get more out of less weight. It's just that it's training you in a different fashion. You're also taking away from your ability to anchor yourself with your legs. And I know that many people see leg drive as this magical thing that puts pounds on the bench. It's true, but it's not because the legs magically help in the lift. It's just that it puts you in a position where you can be perfectly stable and therefore you can grind reps more effectively. I don't want both Omniman or both Omniman enthusiasts to come after me. So I still put it in A tier because I think that if you put in the work, it can still be a great movement to develop your chest. But the following movement is not one of these. You know, building instability by not touching the ground with your feet can be a good idea, but what is never a good idea is to put your back on an unstable surface. That is idiotic. The shoulder blades is what supports your ability to press. Retracting the shoulder blades in the bench is an integral part of keeping healthy shoulders, but also keeping the chest engaged. So if you end up positioning yourself against a Bozu ball, for example, like the idiot in the icon here, you're just killing the lift. You took a perfect lift and you turned it into a circus act. And this is why the Swiss ball press ends up in A cup tier. Simply don't do it. There is no reason to do it. The instability that you gain by putting your back on a Bozu ball adds nothing to the lift. It makes it tougher to control your shoulder blades, tougher to recruit the chest, unstable for no reason. At least the Larson press makes you more unstable so that it forces you to actually retract the shoulders more, keep a flatter back, increase range of motion. So it's justifiable, but for this one, it's not. Banish this from your programs. Then we have the second movement that I built my chest with. It is a classic lift that anyone starts with when they want a bigger chest. For a good reason, it's because it's perfect. It's perfect, but it's not quite there yet. And that is the push-up that I'm placing in excellent tier. The reason why it's not gorilla tier is because there are better variations of the push-up out there that give you more bang for your buck in terms of hypertrophy. The issue with the push-up being that, of course, you're limited by the fact that your chest runs into the ground if you do them standardly, and you're also limited because these are body weight push-up, okay? These are not weighted push-up. So it's still insane that they are placed in excellent tier because it's just like a quote-unquote like easy body weight movement. And yet, many people build incredible chest just doing that, just doing high volume push-ups. So that speaks to the quality of the movement. Easy on the shoulders, easy on the elbows as well. Can be a little bit taxing on the wrists if you overdo it. So great movement. But at some point you graduate from that and you want to do other things. Another thing that you might want to do is the diamond push-up, for example. One of my favorite push-up, if not my favorite, but it's more skewed towards the development of the triceps, which is why I placed it directly in B tier, in decent tier. Yes, there is more travel distance, but unless you position yourself in a certain pattern, you will also find that most of the work goes into the tricep because the elbow goes into maximal flexion. So it's not bad for the chest per se, but if your goal is the chest proper, there are better movements to do out there. Another one that I recommend you guys dodge if what you want is to develop those pectorals is going to be the pike push-up. The pike push-up to me is a mediocre lift for the chest, because you recruit a lot of shoulders, you recruit a lot of upper chest, yes, but the movement of the shoulder and the opening of the shoulder and the chest as you go down is minimal because of the placement of the hands. So it limits the recruitment of the lower chest, the recruitment of the entire pectoral muscle. So it's not a good idea to do that as your main chest movement. When it comes to movements, however, that will greatly open the chest, allow you to feel a full stretch and a full contraction, it is hard to beat cable flies. There are tons of cable flies out there, and the one that we're starting right now with is the low cable fly, where you start low, of course, and you end up high, and the goal is to squeeze the chest maximally. This one to me is gorilla tier. It is, in my opinion, the best way you can do cable flies. It is everything that you want to complete a press. There is an opening of the chest, as I said. The stretch is behind the body because the arm is behind the body, but you can still keep a bend in the elbow so as to not risk problems with your shoulders or your bicep tendon. You can squeeze at the top without having to do anything special, without having to actually lower the intensity of the lift. You can do 15 reps, you can do 4 sets. low fatigue for the tendons of the pectorals of the shoulders. The work is pretty much all pecs. It's the muscle that has to do all of the work. It is incredible. So absolutely do it. If you've never done cable flies, try with this one. You could also, if you want, do high cable flies that, in my opinion, are still excellent. These are the ones where you start high and you're going to crush your chest. You're going to go low like this. Of course, with less elbow flexion, you're going to try to keep your arms as straight as possible so as to use the chest to actually bring the weight down. These are still good. I find that the starting position can be a little bit cumbersome for some, maybe even a little bit dangerous in some aspects. But if you use relevant weight, it's not going to be a problem. With all of these exercises, of course, you end up being the asshole that takes the two cable stations. But at some point, you have to claim the gym because you are a gorilla and you have to claim your territory and be the alpha male. But if you do end up doing that and you do end up taking two cable stations, I recommend not doing the middle cable fly that is only decent. Is the one where you just go like this. I mean, you can do the same movement with other implements and other weights that would actually be better. So I don't really see the point of doing it with cable flies. The reason why both the high and the low cable flies make a ton of sense is because you can't really replicate them with weights, right? If you grab dumbbells like this and you did this, that's not a chest exercise, that's a shoulder exercise. Likewise, if you started low. But if you lay on a bench, you can replicate that very same middle motion and get the same result. So to me, this is the worst type of cable fly out there. Do something else instead. Do the other two big brothers that are much better. When talking about a movement that expands the chest and stretches the chest and produces a contraction, I highly recommend you guys actually dodge the next one. The next one, which is super popular for some reason, and that is the pec deck. I think that people like it because it sounds cool, pec deck, but if you look at the lift and you compare it to the flies I just presented, it's only detrimental. One, your arm is fully stretched, and you think, well, that's great. It heightens the amount of stretch on the chest. Not necessarily. It just makes it harder because the distance between the weight that you move and the muscle that moves it is greater. So, for the most part, what you end up doing is you have to use less weight and you're less effective. On top of that, many people get shoulder issues from this because your arm is fully extended and the brunt of the stress to move the weight is not on the chest anymore. It's on the shoulder. I don't see why you would do that to yourself. I know that the machine is present in every single gym, so maybe that could be the reason why. It's not horrendous, but you can do so much better with the flies I just presented or with another variation of the pec deck, that is the bent arm pec deck, that is an excellent lift. How can it be an excellent lift, you ask? We go from here to here. Well, that makes all of the difference because now the distance between the mover and what holds the mover and the weight is reduced, and you can do your pec decks like this and just try it at home like this. Do this, okay? And then do this. And tell me which ones give you a better contraction of the lower chest. It's going to be the second one. Now, you could tell me, well, what about the stretch? The stretch is the same. The goal is to create distance between what moves the weight and the chest, but you don't have to over-exaggerate it to get results. So always prioritize this type of pec deck. On top of that, it reduces the amount of strain on the shoulders. So what is there not to like? If you end up doing pec deck or any type of fly and it takes away from your ability to press because it taxes your shoulder, you're doing something wrong. These movements complement your presses. They don't replace them. Always keep that in mind. Now, talking about presses, I spoke about push-ups, I spoke about bench press. These are cool, these are great, but they're not the only option. There is another type of horizontal press that produces massive chest gains. And I would even argue that in some cases, in some aspects, it's superior to the bench press, and that is the dips. The dips that, of course, is gorilla tier. It's an amazing movement for the chest. You can go super low range of motion for an amazing stretch and contraction, something that the bench doesn't necessarily have. I find also that it might be better comparatively for triceps, even long head of the tricep, because you can manipulate the angle of the shoulder and the angle of the body as you do it. To me, if you have the ability to do dips without shoulder pain and without sternum pain, be careful if you're a growing, developing young man. Dips can create some issues with the ribcage and the sternum. If you have that ability, just progressively overload on this, on weighted dips, and you're going to have an amazing chest. I guarantee you that. Then we have other types of push-ups. The first one is the decline push-up. The decline push-up, to me, is an excellent movement. If you do them with your feet on the bench, this way, instead of being like this for the push-up, you're going to be slightly in a position where there's going to be more emphasis on the shoulders.
Yes, on the upper chest, yes, but not so much that the stretch and the opening of the elbows and of the chest as you go down is impossible. If you want the ultimate option for push-ups, for developing the chest, and you want to weight them, I think that the deficit push-up is the way to go for you. Very easy to set up. You can just stack plates.
It's perfect because you can decide how much distance between the hands, the rotation of the hands, of the elbows, of the wrists, of the shoulders. All of that is under your control. So you can do something very comfortable, more comfortable than a bench press, I would argue. And then you can just further stretch because there's the deficit. It can be a bit tough to weight it because either you have a backpack, someone sits on your back, someone puts plates on your back. That can be cumbersome, but you can build a massive chest off of that. I don't know if you guys hear. I'm trying to make it so that the audio is going to be as good as possible, which is why it's going to switch between the actual headset and the resounding sound effect of the phone. There is a polar vortex out there. It is minus 35. The wind is bananas. This is the reason why I'm dressed. It's because it's so cold in here that it's impossible not to wear clothes. But I'm doing my best so that you guys can enjoy this video to the fullest. So after the deficit push-up, we have the ring push-up, and that is our second entry that goes straight into gorilla tier. This is amazing. Ring push-ups have all of the benefits of normal push-ups, plus you can rotate the rings. So you can go into a full supination if you want. You can preserve the wrist. I told you that push-ups have a tendency to hurt the wrist if you overdo it. With ring push-ups, there's absolutely no risk. You can go into more flexion, more range of motion for the chest. They're easy on the shoulder. You can retract the shoulder blades very easily. It is an amazing, amazing lift. I recommend that you try it if you never have. Then we have another type of ring push-up that is actually a ring fly. And that is also an excellent lift where instead of going down in a press, you'll go down in a fly. So you'll open the rib cage and you'll open the chest more. This has a certain learning curve to it. Please do not jump into it and just try it the first time because you can injure yourself. You can tear a rotator cuff or you can actually tear a tendon in your pecs. That would be too stupid. So build up to it. What I recommend is you start by doing a neutral grip push-up. So you do a neutral grip press and you open the arm more and more. So you progressively overload by halving the distance between the hand and the shoulder. And before you know it, you'll be able to do a full fly. I've heard amazing things about this movement. I've heard people build this with high volume, high frequency ring chest flies, and they got massive results because the chest stretch is unmatched. So give it a try. If you've never given it a try, I recommend that you actually attempt. The reason why it's not gorilla tier is because, again, the skill cap is a little bit high. And at the end of the day, you can just do normal push-ups. It's just that this is the extreme version for the extreme stretch. Then we have the machine chest press. So for this one, I split it in two. The first one, I'm going to put in mediocre tier. These are the machines that go outside. So it's an outward path and they go up as well. Instead of pressing normally like this, you press like this. So your elbows converge out. These are garbage machines. Sadly, they're also the most frequent. Why? They're cheaper to make. It's much cheaper to make a machine like this, which is why if you go to a commercial gym, most likely your chest press is this. If that is the case, dodge it like the plague. For the most part, these are not built after the way you're built. They're built for just the average Joe. The range of motion is shit. Lots of them, the handle is here. You have to contort yourself to be able to press. It's not comfortable. You can't really control the angle of the elbow, of the shoulder. And on top of that, you press like this, like an idiot. That is simply not how the chest wants to be trained. You're just using way too much shoulder. These really should be called shoulder presses because even though you're technically pressing in front of you, it's simply not doing its job properly. If you want a movement for the chest that is not going to be a bench press while the hands are not necessarily fixed on a bar, there is no reason not to make the path converge at the top of the movement. And this is when the next machine comes into play, which is the converging chest press that is placed in gorilla tier. It makes that much of a difference between a good machine and a bad machine. That is insane. Why? Because with a converging chest press, now you're going to be able to position the handles first and foremost. And when you press, you're going to be able to squeeze. So this is the movement that you're going to make naturally. This is so much better. It makes a world of difference. Even though it's not needed to train the muscle with every single angle and with every single fiber hit differently, I think that there's some merit to training horizontal presses, both laying on your back and by staying upright. It's the same with horizontal pulls. You do your rows bent over, but you also do your cable rows. And the two, while they hit the same muscles, hit them differently. It also adds variety into your program. So this could be a great way to complement your presses because yes, it's still a press. And if you have a good machine, it's going to also be easy on the shoulder, easy on the joints overall, which machines tend to be. It's going to allow you to focus more on the chest, and you'll find that the sensation is absolutely great. Then we have another machine in the machine incline press. To me, this is simply decent. It's still good for the upper chest. It hits some lower chest. It's mostly a shoulder motion. Don't kid yourself. These machines tend to be good. Every single gym tends to have one and they tend to be decent. It's hard to fuck up that machine. As long, of course, as you press upward and back and not upward and in front. I have seen that these are terrible. Avoid this type of machine. And the same goes for incline presses. I know that incline presses are liked by people. It's what I told you at the start of the video. They're an hybrid press. So it's a mix between shoulder work and chest work. Understand that the more inclined the bench is, the more shoulder you work. So if you have a very slight incline like this is still mostly chest. But if you end up like this is mostly shoulder. This is the difference. Many people, when they think upper chest, they think incline press automatically. That's not a bad answer, but it's not the only answer. There are better means out there to isolate the upper chest if you want your isolation. But if you want a complete movement, a compound movement that also works the shoulder, then you should include incline presses into your program. But don't be the guy that does a super heavy horizontal press and follow that up by a super heavy incline press with barely any incline thinking, oh, I'm working different muscles. Yeah, you're just repeating two movements that are so similar that they're just pretty much stealing from one another. And your ability to actually recruit the upper chest is damaged by it. So if you want an incline press, treat it like a priority and you will find that you will get great benefits from it. And we have another type of bench press, the reverse grip bench press. You often see older gentlemen doing this. This is valid for people who cannot press without it, but to me, for anyone else, this is purely mediocre. Why? It's because it is putting you in a very awkward position. Anyone who has attempted to do this knows that it feels terrible on the wrist. It is downright sketchy. It feels good on the shoulders though and on the elbows, but for the chest, beyond some extra activation on the upper chest, I have found that it is simply a downgrade from a regular bench press. So it's not the best idea to skip a normal grip entirely, unless of course this is the only grip that you can do. Then we are going to start talking about things that are a bit more gimmicky, but that are making a comeback. And we're going to start with the power twister. So the power twister is this contraption that looks a little bit like a sex toy even, that many people, many men who don't train at all buy thinking that they're going to be able to squeeze that thing a few times a day and they'll get a massive chest. This is the reason why I'm putting it directly into A cup tier. If you think you're going to get a gorilla chest with this by doing this, it's not going to happen. Yes, you can do this and you can follow squeezing the chest, but guess what? I can do it without the resistance and the same thing happens. So really the only thing that this does is it gives you a slight range of motion in which the chest has to contract to add stability to the movement. And then when it's fully contracted, technically you're holding the weight. So the resistance, I guess, in some people's head translates and transfers into the chest. In reality, it's not really how it works. It's going to give you a good sensation, but in terms of actual damage to the muscle fiber or stimulus, whatever you want to call it, it is minimum. So this is not something that should find its place in your training regimen. The next implement, however, might, and the next one is the chest expander that, for having tried myself for many years, I can pretty confidently place in mediocre tier for chest, because to me, it's a much better implement for pretty much every other muscle group. So for the upper back, it's amazing. For the biceps, it's amazing. For the triceps, it's amazing. But for the chest, it's not that great. Actually, I know that many people think that if they do this, it works the chest. It's more upper back. If you want a good workout with this for the chest, you have to wrap it around a rack and then do flies or presses with it. Why not just do a normal press instead? I think that this is something that is very convenient for people who are traveling and don't have a gym, but it can never replace a proper chest movement ever. And talking about proper presses, we have a classic lift that follows in the close grip bench. The close grip bench that to me is excellent. This is an excellent movement for the chest. Many people think that it's mostly triceps. Understand that It's impossible to take a bench press and to skew it to the point that it now is more triceps than chest just because of the nature of the movement. If you manage to do it, it's not a press anymore. And this one is going to heighten the range of motion, meaning that the chest has to work more. So it's great. Why is it not gorilla tier? It's because many people will find that they are going to be limited by their tricep. The tricep ends up being the limiting factor, and you're going to end up failing midway through the movement. It's not technically a bad thing. The problem being also that because you tuck your elbows in when you do a close grip, you have less flaring out. I know that flaring out your shoulders is seen nowadays as something very dangerous, but it's also how you recruit more chest. So the range of motion sort of makes up for it, but not entirely. You'll find that there's another movement in this list that has both the range of motion and the flaring out that is therefore much better for the lower portion of the chest. This is still, however, a great movement. I would say that for most bodybuilders, you would be better off staying away from the Larsen press and prioritizing the close grip bench press as your main accessory movement for the chest in combination with a regular bench press. At the end of the day, it's all up to taste, of course, but since this gives you more tricep activation, it could be a good idea. On top of it, as I said, because you tuck, it deloads the shoulders, so it's always great. But in terms of movement, of chest movement that are just copying the bench press, that I think can earn their place in gorilla tier along the classic bench press, the spodal press must be mentioned. I made a full video on chest movements, and I told you that some of them were my favorite. The spodal press was one of them. A spodal press is a bench press, but you pose the bar off the chest and then you explode back up. Looks like a small difference, and it is, but it's massive for the health of the shoulders and for the amount of time the chest spends in a stretched position. If you like bench press, but you're like me, and you have realized that touch and go hurts your shoulders over time and you develop obvious injuries, give spodal press a try. You will not be disappointed. And the football bar bench is also excellent. It really is tough to find a bench press variation that is bad unless you make it bad on purpose. This one is great. Tucks your elbows naturally because of the neutral grip, reduces the risk of shoulder injuries, heightens the recruitment of the tricep, but for the same reasons as the close grip bench, I can only put it in excellent tier. However, if you are an athlete or if you play football, you should always press like this. This is my personal opinion. Why? Because if you're a lineman and you go for a block, you're not going to go for a block like this. You're going to go for a block like this.
And your hands, therefore, are in the proper position in a neutral grip when you do the football press. Whereas a grip like this for a normal bench, this is never going to happen. So for the protection of the pecs and also for more sport-specific training, this is a better idea. In my opinion, for bodybuilders, the bench press with a regular bar is going to be superior unless you have a shoulder injury. After this, we have the plate press. So I just told you that it's tough to find a press that is bad for the chest because all presses, or horizontal presses at least, recruit the chest by default. But you can always count on fitness influencers to find ways to turn great motions into complete circus acts that now lose all sense and meaning. This one is one of them. I'm sure that you've seen that on Instagram before. The plate press is when you do a bench press, but instead of a bar, you have a plate and you hold it like this. Why would you hold a plate like a sandwich like this when you can hold a bar? The bar makes the weight rest into your hand. You don't have to grip it. Here, you have to actually fight against the weight. How relevant is it going to be for a strong guy? You think that a guy that can press 3 plates is going to be able to get a workload with 1 plate that is going to be sufficient to train their chest? You're going to end up with 6 plates like this. This is now a grip exercise. It's not a chest exercise. So you end up going for the pump. And all of these influencers that show these movements say, oh, you get a great pump. Does it make it a good exercise? No. With your elbows tucked in like this on top of that, there's no stretch. So it really is just a game of contraction. Guess what? Do this right now and flex your chest like this. Congratulations, you got a better workout. Stay away from the plate press. The only benefit of this is that it tells you who is a charlatan and who is a complete idiot in the realm of fitness and who actually knows what they're talking about. If someone tells you that this is a good movement, run away from them. They're trying to run a gimmick on you. They're trying to bring novelty into your program with things that don't actually work. This is actual garbage. But as surprising as it sounds, it's possible to be worse than the plate press. There is a variation of the plate press that is even stupider, and that is the Sven press. I don't know who Sven was, but he was not a smart fellow if the lift was named after him. Of course, Mark Lofteliner ends up being the guy that illustrates the movement. So this vent press is a plate press that you do standing up. So instead of actually using gravity to work the chest, you're up like this and you do this. If you see someone in the gym doing this, don't talk to them. Their parents were cousins, 100%. This is so stupid because it also teaches you who understands gravity and who doesn't. Why does a bench press train the chest? It's because gravity is going downward. So the muscle that is resisting gravity is the chest. If you're standing up, what muscle is working when you do this? It's not the chest, it's the shoulders, it's the upper back, the arm, the forearms in isometric contraction, but it's not the chest. And yet, some people do it, and you look at them and you're like, don't you realize that the chest does nothing? Are you feeling your chest right now? You feel the contraction, but the contraction, again, as I explained, is not a workout. So Sven press, it's a practical joke of a lift, but on the off chance that one of you guys is doing it, I wanted to include it. Also because I wanted to make fun of people who actually do that and think they're going to get a big chest off of it. After the Sven press, we go back to the realm of the gods. Why look like a complete moron in the middle of the gym doing this with plates when you can just do a time-tested exercise that has produced massive pectorals throughout the ages? Why not just do a dumbbell press? It's so simple. You grab dumbbells, you lay on your back, and you press them. It's much more ergonomic than a bench press with a barbell because you can rotate the elbows. You can place your hands however you want. If things go wrong and you don't have a spotter, guess what? You can just dump the dumbbells and nothing bad happens. I recommend anyone who doesn't feel their chest on the barbell bench to start with dumbbell bench and then graduate from there. Or guess what? You can also stay dumbbell benching for the rest of your life. I stopped because the dumbbells that I have right now for me to have a workout that stimulates me are not conducive because they're way too bulky, so they run into my chest. But if you go to a proper gym, you're going to be able to progressively overload forever on that movement. You can go much lower than with a barbell because you can tuck much more. It is a movement that I think is overlooked nowadays because it's not flashy, but it belongs in gorilla tier maybe more than some of these other movements. If you want a big chest, you should absolutely do your dumbbell press.
Right? Keep it old school, keep it traditional. Every time something works, you always have some idiot who comes and who wants to modify it to make it flashier. And that is exactly what happened with that next movement on our list, the alternating dumbbell press, that I'm putting in decent tier. I know that it triggers the fuck out of fitness YouTubers for a good reason. So usually they say, oh, it's the worst exercise. It's not. It's still a dumbbell press. It's just that, why? You have a perfectly good movement that is synchronistic with the two arms at the same time, so the chest is stretched evenly at the same time. Why do one arm and not the other? There is no explanation for it. For a curl, it's because you don't want the momentum of the hips when you do both arms at the same time, but with this, you're on your back. It makes no sense. It's like you always have that one guy where you have that recipe, like your grandma makes the perfect cherry pie, and it's delicious. You always have that one guy that wants to change the recipe. He wants to add like vanilla extract because he's a fucking hipster. Fuck that guy. He makes the recipe worse every single time. Grandma's cherry pie was perfect as it was. Rent over, the dumbbell press is good as it is. No need to alternate between the two arms. Then we have the reverse grip dumbbell press. So I shot on the straight bar reverse grip, and therefore you might be surprised to find that this lift ends up in excellent tier. How come? Well, it's because dumbbell versus barbell. If you try to fixate both hands in a reverse grip position on a barbell, it's awkward, right? Because if you're trying to do two at the same time, they each compete with one another. And since the two shoulders are stationary, now it's a nightmare, a logistical nightmare, and it feels terrible. But with dumbbells, each end is independent, so it feels much better. If you've never tried, give it a try. Many people report that they never could feel their upper chest before, and doing the reverse grip on the dumbbell bench press actually changed their world entirely. So attempt it. I think it's a good movement. And it also is a good movement if you do it on an incline. So I'm going to put it in decent tier because I put the incline press in decent tier and they're pretty much the same motion. And it resembles an Arnold press, but it's technically not because the Arnold press is done with a perfectly vertical torso, which is why it's only mediocre for the development of the chest. Yes, you're going to find that you feel some contraction when you go like this, and there's some upper chest in there, especially if you're really bent backward and you're not entirely straight. But it's not comparable to other chest movements because, of course, your torso is much more vertical. Then we have the overhead press, which is in the same line. The overhead press that is even lower because your hands always stay in line with the shoulder. They never actually rotate inside. So it ends up in A cup tier. And you could tell me, okay, NH, you're just adding lifts for the sake of adding lifts. What is the next one? Squats. You're going to tell us that squat is bad for your chest. I include the overhead press because I know that people think it works the chest. I know that some people think, oh, it's all I need for upper chest. Wrong. This is a shoulder motion first and foremost. So you have hybrids in the middle with incline presses that are B tier. You have overhead press that are D tier, and you have bench press that is gorilla tier. That makes a ton of sense. Moving on to another type of push-up, the Hindu push-up, only mediocre, way too much body motion. There's no real elbow flexion going on. The goal is really not to target the chest in the first place. It's more of an holistic push-up, so it's bad. I don't really need to explain to you why there are so many better push-up variations out there. And the next one is one of them. The planche push-up, I think, is fairly good. It only lands in decent tier because I find that this position of the elbows and of the wrist is very uncomfortable. I understand why calisthenic bros do it. Is because it brings the hands much closer to the hips and to your center of gravity, which allows you to go into a planche in the first place. But for a bodybuilder, why would you do that? Now it's a balancing act with the core actually having to walk, and that's not what you want. It takes a lot of skill to be able to do a full planche push-up. To me, it's not justifiable. The reverse grip with your feet touching the ground could be a good idea, but again, because you're so close to your hips, it's less chest dominant and it's more tricep dominant. So better things to do out there. And the one-arm push-up is the worst of all of these. You know, it's something that people struggle to understand, especially people who've never touched calisthenics before. Usually the movements for calisthenics that are the best for muscle building are the easiest in the sense that they are the ones that require the less technical excellence. The more technical you become, the less muscle you use, which doesn't mean that it doesn't require strength. It's just that no calisthenic bro who is super advanced built his physique and his muscle mass with the super advanced movements. And the next one is the proof of that. The one-arm push-up, that is A cup tier. Why? Because you will find that these guys who have massive chests and who can bang out one-arm push-ups didn't actually train one-arm push-ups by doing one-arm push-ups. They got stronger with push-ups and then they developed the skills to be able to do the one-arm push-up. So the muscular requirement was taken care of by regular push-ups and dips instead. And when you look at the way they do their one-arm push-up, you understand it. They contort their body. I've never seen someone do a push-up like Goku would, where he has one arm behind his back, one arm like this, and he does his push-up like this. A one-arm push-up is not a push-up with only one hand instead of two. It's a completely different motion. So, terrible idea. Do not invest your technical points and your energy into being able to do a one-arm push-up because it's not the one-arm push-up itself that will make you big. It's the training to do the one-arm push-up. Then we have dumbbell flies. These are dumbbell flies done with a fully extended arm. And for the same reason, I'm going to put it in a decent tier. It's not terrible, but it's like a straight arm pec deck. It's just not justifiable. You are making yourself weaker by creating a bigger moment arm and by damaging your levers in reality. It's slightly better than a pec deck because I think that there's less risk of obvious injury for the tendons of the shoulders. So it's in the middle, but if you want the best way to do a fly by getting all of the benefits and none of the issues, I recommend doing fly presses that I'm placing directly in Gorilla tier. Again, I made a video about it on the channel, you can go check it out. It's all of the good things about flies without the inconveniences. Same stretch on the chest, same contraction at the top, but you can use more weight and more safely. So if you're a fly bro and you do a shit ton of flies, first and foremost, consider doing your flies if you want an open arm position with cables because it just makes a ton more sense in terms of tension on the muscle and in terms of reducing the impact on the tendon. But if you absolutely want to do your flies on your back, do a fly press instead and you will be impressed indeed. I'm quite the poet today. Next one is the incline dumbbell cable fly. To me, this is also excellent. I find that it's a fly done with cable, so it's already going to be good. It's in a position that allows you to open the chest and recruit the upper chest in a fashion that I don't see many movements being able to replicate. And I have also found that if you do them with dumbbells instead, you're going to be able to eliminate some of the issues that a flat back on the fly could create. For example, the tendency to overextend. In a position where your back is like this, you can't overextend, because if you attempt, you're going to find that your shoulder blades are going to run into the bench, and naturally you're going to try to prevent that from happening. So your elbow is going to be much more tucked in, which means that you're going to move directly into a fly press, which makes much more sense. So this is a motion I rarely see any people do because it's a bitch to set up, but it's a good idea if you want some variation in your flies. Now, after flies, we have the floor press. This is also a favorite of powerlifters. I think that the floor press is only decent. It's not bad, it's only decent, because the floor prevents you from going all the way down, so it prevents you from getting a full chest stretch, which is what we're looking at and looking for when we do a bench press for hypertrophy. So since there are better options out there, I don't see why this one would be favored in your program. And it also goes for the next one that is done on the floor. Usually you have to be careful when someone places you on your back. It's usually the sign that bad things are going to happen, both in grappling and in life. And the gym is life, as we all know. So if someone tells you, hey bro, we're going to do some flies, get on your back, run away. You are not going to have a good time. The floor fly is the worst variation of flies out there, which is why it goes into A cup tier. What is the goal of a fly? The goal of a fly is to feel the chest stretch and then contract. If you are on your back on the floor, you're not going to be able to feel the stretch, because your arm, when it gets into the stretching position, runs into the floor. Who came up with this idea? Again, some genius who thought he was going to reinvent grandma's apple pie and instead made a shit pie. Never do your flies like this, please. Then we have medicine ball chest press. So again, what did I just tell you? If you're on your back and you're not doing a bench press, things are going to go wrong. This is one of them. You usually see these types. It's usually a guy in his 30s who has some Italian heritage with a shitty beard like your servitor right now, and who thinks that he's going to get a massive chest by pressing a medicine ball on his back. Look at the amount of tension you get. The medicine ball is what, 10 pounds? Do you think that the acceleration going down is going to justify growth? Do you think that it's magically going to create hypertrophy? No, it's just a shittier version of a dumbbell press. Do not do this. I think that people do it because they think it makes them look cool, or they watch one too many NFL football motivation video where they saw Ray Lewis doing this. Ray Lewis does it because he has to take away like all of his criminal instincts. He has to take it out on something, so he takes it out on the medicine ball, right? A barbell is not, it doesn't feel enough like a living thing. But for you, just use weights, bro. Why are you trying to overcomplicate things? And the medicine ball seems to be a cursed item because the next movement also includes one. Medicine ball push-ups. Why? Isn't the floor good enough for you? Are your delicate hands not able to touch the rugged cement floor of the gym? Why would you put your hands like this on a medicine ball? It makes it unstable. It makes it uncomfortable for the wrist. It's just the worst of everything. There's no justification for this. Again, people will think, oh, it's more functional. Oh yeah? Do you often do push-ups off of random balls that just roll around on the street? Do normal push-ups. You're not special. Just do your push-ups like everyone else. After this, we have the clap push-ups. So this one is also pure show-off. I know because I used to do it. When I trained football, everyone else was doing regular push-ups when we got punished, and I was doing clap push-ups to show that I was cooler than them. I wasn't, I was just a little twerp, but yeah, it does look cool. It's not terrible. I actually put it directly, I believe, in a decent tier, but why? When you can do a normal push-up, or better yet, a weighted push-up. If you're strong enough to just skyrocket off the floor and clap like a seal, just put weight on your back, bro, and actually challenge the muscle in the stretch position. Next one is the landmine press. This is also in A cup. Why? You press upward and overhead. So even though there's a slight diagonal trajectory, it doesn't justify it as a good chest exercise. There's some upper chest activation, but almost none. And it's sort of the same with the Viking press that goes into mediocre tier. You'll find that, again, in the same logic, the more you press in front of you, the more chest you recruit. So landmine press is like this, Viking press is like this, so you use more chest, so it's mediocre. And then you have the only landmine movement that I think is justifiable for chest training, and that is the squeeze landmine chest press.
So this one is done with your two hands on the bar, and again, you push much more in front of you, you squeeze. It's not horrible, but it's not that great. I think that the landmine press and the attachment itself is much better suited for other movements like unilateral leg movements, like movements for the shoulders, like movement for the upper back. For the chest, it's not that great. It was not created with in mind the idea that it was going to grow your chest. So dodge it, and you will find that you're better off with dumbbells and with barbells. There are certain machines that I have found have the potential to develop a great chest, and I think that the plate loaded machine is actually one that is good. So this is the little thing that you see right there, and I am placing in Gorilla tier. It highly depends on the quality of the machine. Again, it's like the convergent chest press. This one is plate loaded, so it's technically just a bench press on your back. The problem is that you don't get to pick your grip because the handles are pretty sided, of course, but some of them are so good that I'm that close to saying that they're better than a normal bench press. There's more range of motion because your hand can tuck in as opposed to with a bar, because you're holding your handle this time so you can go past the shoulder. Some of them converge, so you can press inside like this, right? Naturally, this is what the chest wants to do. You rarely want to do this. So it also gives you a better stimulus for the chest, deloads the shoulder, deloads the joints. If you are lucky enough to have one of these in your gym, I know that there's a stigma attached to not doing your bench press with a plate and with bar, because how much do you bench, bro? Well, you can flex on people and tell them you bench 3 plates and be like, oh my god, but actually you bench them with the machine, which is quite easy to do, and you get great results. It doesn't matter if you can bench 3 plates with a straight bar or not. What matters is how big your chest is. Now, when talking about movements that one should include in their program, the next one is not one of them, because the shrugs, the dumbbell shrugs at least, end up in A cup tier. Why is this included again? It's not a chest movement. Well, some people feel their chest on shrugs. I'm one of them. But does it mean that it's a good movement? No, it's just that naturally when you raise your shoulder, you feel the shoulder, the trap, but also the upper chest. If you want to do a shrug movement that is targeting directly the upper chest, you can attempt to do what is called the upper chest shrug that I'm putting in decent tier. It was popularized on YouTube by Michael Gundil, who is my French countryman, who invented the movement because he could never fill his chest with other presses, and he realized that by grabbing onto a handle, like a belt squat handle, and shrugging inside like this, he was able to stretch and recruit the upper chest maximally. The reason why it's only decent is because this movement by itself will never build a massive chest, but it's an option for those of you that want to fill the chest. And it's also an option for people that want to isolate the upper chest without taking away from their ability to press a lot. They don't want to recruit the shoulder on an incline press, for example. This is your best friend. The stimulus to fatigue ratio on this is pristine. It's immaculate. Nothing is going to get tired beyond the upper chest. So absolutely give it a try at least once in your life. Then we have the guillotine press, another movement that I find is great for the upper chest. But before we get into it, I have to make a correction. I placed the plate-loaded press, plate-loaded bench in excellent tier. It's not excellent, it's actually gorilla tier. Sorry about that. The next one is excellent tier. Guillotine press is a press done with maximum flaring out of the elbow, which makes it quite dangerous on the shoulders in terms of load, but the good thing is that you will never use as much weight as you could on a bench press as with this. You're supposed to use sub-maximal loads, always with a spotter, of course. I think, personally, that it's better to do this movement with rings instead of with weights, because it's less dangerous and you can go deeper and get more of a stretch. But if you're someone that is comfortable in that flaring out position, you can include guillotine press. It was one of the most favorite motions and movements of the silver era and golden era bodybuilders to build a big chest for a reason. It fell out of popularity because now we have an obsession over shoulder health, which is a good thing. But keep in mind that your shoulders have the ability to move through motion. As long as you do things properly, there won't be a problem. However, if you are someone who wants more range of motion without having to untuck the elbow
and still be safe and have healthy shoulders growing older, you should give the camber bar bench a try. The camber bar bench to me is directly placed into gorilla tier right there. It's a bar with a dip. So instead of having a straight bar like this, there is a square where you can put your chest, and this means that it allows the elbows to travel further back, and it allows the hands to go deeper as well. So you get more more stretch. I told you previously in the video that there existed a variation of the bench that gave you that extra stretch. This is that extra stretch. Again, give it a try. Some people will find that all they need is the range of motion of a regular bench with a regular bar. Some people will find that the camber bar gives them that extra piece of range of motion that they feel they need to develop that lower portion of the chest. The next movement, however, is never going to be gorilla tier. It is pure A cup tier. That is the inclined dumbbell around the wood. That is a pure circus motion, to be honest with you. I've seen people do it. This is a motion for the shoulders and the upper back. And I recommend people do it facing the bench and not laying on their back on the bench. Then we have another push-up. There's a long list of push-ups. I think this one is the last one. That is the resistance band push-up. That is also excellent for the same reasons that a push-up is excellent. You're still limited in terms of range of motion, but you can actually add more resistance to them by placing a band around your hand and around your back. And what the elastic does is that the more you push up, the more tension it creates, because the more you separate yourself from your hand, and the lower you go, the less tension there is. So there's more tension at lockout. This can be a great way to progressively overload your push-ups if you don't have access to a backpack or to a weight vest. The next push-up variation, however, I recommend you guys don't do, and that is the crucifix push-ups that I'm putting in mediocre tier. It's a cool push-up. Again, it's a show-off push-up. Very difficult, but it's not difficult for the right reasons. Your hands are way too spread, they're way too far from your chest, there's no elbow flexion. So essentially this is a contraction exercise where the stretch of the chest is completely eliminated. It's cool if you want to prove that you're strong with your body weight, but to grow a bigger chest, it's simply not suited. Then we have another type of fly called the upper chest crossover that I'm placing in decent tier. To me, it's not the best fly at all, because the position of the hands as you go to clap in front of your face to recruit the upper chest forces you to have perfectly straight arms, which again can be dangerous on the shoulder, especially the back of the shoulder for this one, on the AC joint. So you're going to have to use less weight. There are better options out there to recruit the upper chest, and there are better options out there to do a cable fly to stretch the chest. And this is why the next one might confuse you a bit. It's a cable crossover as well. So I already placed 4. This one I'm placing in mediocre tier. Why? What is the difference? Well, this is the wrong way to do a cable crossover, regardless of how you do it. Clap, you can do it low, you can do it high. I don't care how you do it. If you do the one thing that this guy is doing in the picture, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. And that is when people actually attempt to cross over. They try to cross over their body by crisscrossing their arms. Don't do it. There is no point. I guess people think it makes them look cool. It doesn't. The goal is for the hands to touch. This is when maximum contraction is achieved. Going past it does nothing. It recruits more shoulders, more upper back, but the extra chest contraction that you feel, all of that is just in your head. It's just sensation. You're damaging your ability to reset and go into the stretch, which is why we do flies. Yes, they feel good because it pumps blood into the chest, but you're building muscle because at the bottom, you're fighting back against the cable and the tension, and you're going upward again. This is why we do flies. So don't do this. Top of it, I have found that guys who do their crossovers like this have a 100% chance of letting go of the cables once they're done. How many times have you seen that? Well, the guy just goes like this. This destroys stacks. It's always the same dude. He always has tattoos. When do we ban this dude from our gym? Next movement is the dumbbell chest fly. So as I said again, you have movements that are good with cables, for example. Then you always have a dude who understands nothing of gravity and the way muscles works, and we think, oh, I can replicate that using dumbbells. So you end up with an oaf, like this dude that I just picked a random thumbnail from YouTube, who decided to just do his flies with dumbbells. So it resembles a straight arm curl. This movement has its place. It does recruit the upper chest, but look at all of the movements I listed in this tier list that recruit the upper chest. This one is the worst of them. It's one of the worst of them. There is no reason to do that movement with dumbbells. You over-recruit the shoulder and the front delt in particular. All of that for a measly chest contraction. Idiotic. Avoid that like the plague. Then we have the Smith machine press. So this one is going into excellent tier. I understand that there is a stigma around the Smith machine for a reason. It's because if you're a beginner and you learn how to bench press with the Smith machine, wrong idea. Now it's a terrible movement and it's most likely mediocre or A cup tier because you're trying to stick to something that is easy and doesn't scare you, but by doing that, you damage your ability to actually learn how to use the weight, how to use the stabilizers of the muscle, how to feel the stretch. And also you're most likely doing the Smith machine press because you can use more weight. Bad idea, okay? Go back, use less weight, learn how to do the movement. However, if you're a more advanced lifter, you can make proper use of the Smith machine press because you're going to be able to use the specs of the machine to your advantage. For example, the fact that you can suffer through the negative, the fact that you can explode and use the positive more in a contracting fashion as opposed to a bench press. All of these are things that do make the Smith machine press a good movement for more advanced bodybuilders. But if you are just getting started with chest training, I recommend you do free weights instead. But the Smith machine press will always be better than the next option for novices, and that is the wall push-ups. Look, guys, I've been there. I was skinny and weak. I could barely do a push-up, but I've never done a wall push-up in my life. Why? Gravity. Look at what a wall push-up is. There's almost no tension on the chest. It's at least do an incline push-up if you want something easier, or a girl push-up on your knees. Why do this? I've seen videos with millions of views of how to do a wall push-up. You know why? It's because novices always go for the easier variation and the easy way out. How many of these people who started with wall push-ups do you think are still doing push-ups today? I would say zero, because this is not a proper way to train your chest or to train a push-up pattern. Again, it's just trying to do something that is not scary and is not that difficult. But guess what? If you never do things that are difficult, you will always have a shitty physique. Now, the next movement is a bit of an anomaly because some people will swear that it's the best chest exercise and it gives them the best stretch. Some people will say they feel it everywhere else but during the chest. That is the pullover. To me, I'm a bit in the middle. I understand that some people are built in a way that they feel pullovers in their chest and never in their lats, in which case it could be a good exercise, but also understand that the reason why you feel it in your chest is because your shoulders are being stretched maximally and the chest has to support that. So it could potentially be a bit dangerous to try to overload the pullovers for the sole purpose of developing the chest. I'm still placing it in mediocre tier. It's not A cup tier. If you want to have a proof that it does work the chest, you can do a very heavy chest exercise or workout and then the next day do pullovers. Yeah, you'll fill your chest. The chest does work. But it's simply that the weights being recruited in the pullover is not really active. It's more of a passive stretch. So in this case, I don't think it is a valid option, and it's certainly not a valid movement to center an entire chest training day around. Then we have the X press. So this one also looks a little bit like a meme, but upon further inspection, to me, I think it's still decent. It's not that bad. Essentially what you do is you stick two dumbbells together and you go down. But based on things that we already discussed, because there's so much elbow travel and not flaring out of the elbow, yes, it's going to work the chest, but it's never going to work the chest as much as a regular dumbbell press would, for example. People love this movement because you feel a constant contraction and squeeze of the chest. I explained it a million times in this video. This does not mean that the movement is good for the chest. If you can find a movement that has a converging motion at the top that allows you to squeeze on top of also allowing for a flaring out and a full stretch, then it would make for a much better motion, which is why this one is only decent and the cable press actually is excellent. So this one you will rarely see because you either have to set it up by moving a bench or you have to have a gym that has them. Usually all gyms tend to have machine presses without cables. This one is a rarity, but for the same reasons that I explained why a regular chest press with a machine can be great, this one is great as well. You can control each handle, each hand is independent, you can flare out. The stretch is not as severe because, as we come to understand with the cable is taking some of the brunt of the tension off of the muscle, but since it converges, you can feel a great stretch. So while not the best pressing variation for chest, I still think it is a valid option. And as I said, since the amount of presses in this tier list where your torso is vertical are a rarity as opposed to ones where it is horizontal, I think that it deserves its spot in excellent tier just because it can complete your workout. However, always make sure to do it seated, because if you do it standing, now it's an A cup tier exercise because you're going to be tempted to cheat. And every time you see a guy doing their press like this, standing up, they move their body back and forth. It's like seeing those guys doing face pulls and their torso does this like a noodle. That's not a chest exercise anymore. It's a full body exercise. You're using your legs, your hips. And that is going to conclude this video. So a lot of movements, 60 plus. And we have now gotten to a point where this is the fourth tier list with the other ones that I placed in the description. And you're starting to get a pretty good idea of what movements work and what movements don't work.
But we are only getting started. As I said, I plan to review every single muscle group and to make a tier list for every single muscle group. So you can look forward to the next one that is going to be about the traps. And after that, I'll run another poll to ask you guys which muscles you want to see. But this is going to be for next time. For tonight, I'm going to wish you a very Merry Christmas, and I will see you very soon.